The Stellar Junction restaurant wasn't like any place on Earth. It floated in the middle of space, right where 3 different star systems met. Ships from all over the galaxy would stop here to eat, trade, and sometimes argue about politics. The place was huge, with dining areas that could change their gravity and atmosphere depending on what kind of aliens were eating there. Tonight felt different though. The staff could sense trouble coming from light years away. When the massive gold and black warship appeared outside the viewing ports, everyone knew exactly who had arrived. Emperor Krath of the Dominion had come to dinner, and that never ended well for anyone. The Emperor was the kind of being that made other aliens nervous just by existing. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in dark purple scales that seemed to absorb light. His eyes glowed like burning coals, and when he walked, each step sounded like thunder. Behind him came 12 royal guards, each one carrying weapons that could probably blow up a small moon. Destiny Johnson had been working at the restaurant for 3 years now. She'd served beings from hundreds of different worlds, each with their own weird habits and special dietary needs. Some aliens ate rocks, others survived on pure energy, and a few could only digest food that was still moving. She'd learned to handle all of it with a smile. But the Emperor was different. Everyone knew the stories about his temper and how he treated beings he considered beneath him. The last restaurant that made him angry had been shut down permanently, and the owner had disappeared entirely. The Emperor chose a table right in the center of the main dining hall, making sure everyone could see him. The other customers, including ambassadors and trade officials from dozens of worlds, suddenly became very quiet. Some even got up and left, not wanting to be anywhere near whatever was about to happen. When Destiny approached his table, she kept her voice calm and professional. "Good evening, Your Majesty. Welcome to Stellar Junction. How can I help you tonight?" The Emperor barely looked at her. Instead, he started barking orders in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. He wanted the Andromedan crystal fish, but prepared with Rigel spices that would actually poison his species. He demanded Terran wine mixed with chemicals that would create toxic fumes. Every single thing he ordered was either dangerous, impossible, or completely against health regulations. Destiny knew the menu better than anyone. She'd studied the dietary requirements of every species in the galaxy, not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared about keeping people safe. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but mixing those ingredients could seriously harm your digestive system. I'd be happy to suggest something that would taste similar but be safe for you to eat." The Emperor's eyes blazed brighter. His scales seemed to darken, and the temperature around his table actually started to rise. When he spoke, his voice was so loud that the restaurant's universal translator had trouble keeping up. "You dare question me?" he roared. "A pathetic human service worker thinks she knows better than the ruler of 50 star systems? Your species crawled out of mud while mine was building galactic empires." The insults kept coming. He called humans primitive, worthless, and too stupid to understand basic concepts. He said that serving aliens was the highest purpose any human could hope for, and that Destiny should be grateful he was even allowing her to breathe the same air as him. The entire restaurant had gone completely silent. Conversations at nearby tables stopped mid-sentence. Alien ambassadors who had been arguing about trade agreements suddenly found themselves united in their shock at what they were witnessing. Some beings had never seen such a display of cruelty, while others recognized it all too well. The Emperor's guards stood perfectly still, their weapons ready, making it clear that anyone who interfered would regret it. The restaurant security team stayed back, knowing that starting a fight with the Dominion would mean trouble for everyone. Through it all, Destiny just stood there. She didn't cry, didn't run away, didn't call for help. She let the Emperor finish his rant while every eye in the restaurant watched to see what would happen next. Some beings expected her to collapse under the verbal assault. Others figured she'd apologize and back down like so many others had done before. But as the Emperor's voice finally faded and the echo of his anger died away, something unexpected happened. Destiny smiled. Not a scared smile or a fake customer service smile, but a genuine, confident smile that somehow made the massive alien ruler look smaller than he had just moments before. Destiny took a deep breath and set her order pad down on the table. The simple action somehow commanded more attention than all of the Emperor's shouting had. She looked directly into his burning eyes without flinching, something that made several aliens gasp in surprise. Most beings couldn't even make eye contact with Emperor Krath without trembling. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent restaurant, "can I ask you something? Do you know what we humans mean when we talk about true strength?" The Emperor's mouth opened to deliver another insult, but something in her tone made him pause. There was no fear there, no anger, just genuine curiosity mixed with quiet confidence. We have this old saying back on Earth, Destiny continued, now speaking not just to the Emperor but to everyone in the restaurant. We judge people not by how they treat their equals, but by how they treat those who can't fight back. She gestured around the dining hall, where beings from dozens of different worlds sat watching. You see, Your Majesty, I've been working here for 3 years. In that time, I've served thousands of customers from hundreds of different species. And I've learned something interesting about real power. The Emperor's scales were still dark with anger, but he found himself listening despite his rage. Something about this small human's manner was completely different from what he'd expected. Take Ambassador Vrex over there, Destiny said, nodding toward a table where an insect-like being sat with his delegation. His people need their food heated to exactly 340 degrees, no more, no less. Get it wrong and they can't digest it properly. But here's the thing, he never demands it. He asks politely, says please and thank you, and always makes sure to compliment the chef. She turned slightly to indicate another table. Or consider Captain Ziltana. Her species can only eat certain minerals, and they have to be prepared in a specific way that takes 2 hours. She always calls ahead, never complains about the wait, and tips the kitchen staff because she knows how much extra work it takes. The restaurant remained deadly quiet, but now it felt different. Instead of tension and fear, there was something else in the air, curiosity, maybe even hope. Beings who had been ready to flee were now leaning forward to hear what this human would say next. You want to know what real strength looks like? Destiny asked, her voice growing more confident with each word. It's being powerful enough to destroy someone and choosing to lift them up instead. It's having the ability to take whatever you want and deciding to earn respect through kindness. She picked up a glass of water from a nearby table and held it up so everyone could see. This looks simple, right? Just water. But for it to be safe for everyone in this restaurant, our kitchen has to filter it through 17 different systems. We adjust the mineral content for the kalari, remove the fluorides that poison the necks, and add trace elements that the Vorten need to survive. The Emperor watched in confusion as this human continued her strange lecture. He was used to beings cowering before him, not giving him chemistry lessons. We do all of that not because we have to, Destiny explained, but because we choose to. Because humans learned a long time ago that taking care of others isn't a sign of weakness, it's the strongest thing you can possibly do. She walked closer to the Emperor's table, and his guards tensed, but she showed no fear. Your Majesty, you rule 50 star systems. You command fleets of warships and armies of soldiers. You could probably destroy this entire restaurant with a single order. The Emperor nodded, pleased that she finally seemed to understand his power. But do you know what I can do that you can't? Destiny asked, her smile growing wider. I can make every single being in this restaurant feel welcome and safe. I can turn enemies into friends over a shared meal. I can take someone having the worst day of their life and send them home happy. She gestured around the room again. Look around, Your Majesty. Really look. See how everyone is watching? They're not afraid anymore. They're hoping. Hoping that maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that there's a better way to use power than making others feel small. The Emperor's burning eyes began to dim slightly as her words sank in. For the first time in centuries, someone wasn't trying to flatter him or fear him. This human was challenging him to be better, and somehow, that felt more powerful than any threat or weapon he'd ever faced. Destiny walked a few steps away from the Emperor's table, positioning herself where everyone in the restaurant could see and hear her clearly. The silence was so complete that even the soft hum of the space station's life support system seemed loud. I need to tell you all something, she said, her voice steady but carrying a weight that made even the most powerful beings lean forward. I'm not just a waitress. My real name is Dr. Destiny Johnson, and until 2 years ago, I was a professor of xenobiology at the Terran Science Institute. A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Several aliens exchanged glances, clearly recognizing the prestige of that position. The Emperor's eyes narrowed as he tried to process this information. I had everything a human scientist could want, Destiny continued. A corner office overlooking the Academy Gardens, research grants worth millions of credits, and students who hung on my every word. I was studying the dietary evolution of spacefaring species, trying to understand how different civilizations adapted their food systems as they spread across the stars. She picked up her order pad, holding it like it was something precious. Then the budget cuts came. Military spending went up, science funding went down. They told me that studying alien eating habits wasn't important enough to keep funding. They said it was just academic curiosity with no practical value. The restaurant remained silent, but now there was something different in the air. Beings who had dismissed her as just another service worker were starting to see her in a completely new light. I could have been bitter, Destiny said, walking slowly between the tables. I could have left the galaxy, gone back to Earth, maybe gotten a job teaching basic biology to kids who didn't care. But instead, I came here. She stopped next to a table where a family of blue-skinned Altarians sat with their young ones. Because I realized something amazing. This restaurant isn't just a place to eat. It's the greatest laboratory in the galaxy. The Emperor found himself genuinely listening now, his anger temporarily forgotten in the face of his curiosity. Every single day, I get to observe and interact with beings from hundreds of different worlds. I learn about their cultures, their biology, their hopes and fears. But more than that, I get to help them. She smiled at the Altarian family, who smiled back warmly. Take the Zephyrians, for example, she said, nodding toward a table of tall, ethereal beings who seemed to shimmer in the light. Their home world has 3 suns, so they process nutrients completely differently than most species. The first time they came here, they ordered standard protein, not knowing it would make them sick for days. She walked toward their table as she continued. I spent my break researching their physiology, contacted colleagues who had studied their species, and worked with our kitchen to create a meal that would not only be safe but would actually boost their energy levels for their long journey home. The Zephyrian at the head of the table stood up gracefully and bowed. Dr. Johnson saved our mission, he said in a voice like wind chimes. We were explorers, far from home, and we would have been stranded without her help. Destiny nodded gratefully and kept walking. Or consider the Magellanic traders over there. Their species went through a genetic bottleneck 2,000 years ago that left them with very specific nutritional needs. Most restaurants just tell them to bring their own food. She approached their table, where several bear-like creatures sat around what looked like bowls of glowing soup. But I learned that certain earth spices, when combined properly, can actually supplement their diet and make their food more nutritious. Now they stop here on every trade route. One of the traders raised his bowl in a salute. To the human who treats us like family, he rumbled in a deep voice. The Emperor watched all of this with growing amazement. His own royal nutritionists knew less about his dietary needs than this human seemed to know about dozens of species. You see, Your Majesty, Destiny said, finally turning back to face him directly, humans didn't conquer the galaxy through force or superior technology. We don't have the strongest weapons or the fastest ships. But we have something else. She spread her arms wide, encompassing the entire restaurant. We have the ability to see every being we meet as worth understanding. We believe that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied, and that taking care of others makes everyone stronger. The Emperor's scales had returned to their normal color, and his burning eyes had dimmed to a steady glow. For the first time in his long life, he was beginning to understand that there might be types of power he had never even considered. The atmosphere in the restaurant began to change as Destiny's words settled over the crowd. What had started as a tense confrontation was turning into something completely different. Beings who had been frozen in fear were now looking at each other with new understanding. Ambassador Kelvin of the Rigel Commonwealth slowly stood up from his table. He was an older being, his silver skin marked with the ceremonial scars of a seasoned diplomat. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of interstellar negotiations. Dr. Johnson, he said, his voice clear enough for everyone to hear, I must share something with this gathering. He turned to face the Emperor directly. 3 months ago, our peace talks with the Outer Rim colonies were failing. We had been negotiating for weeks, but cultural misunderstandings kept derailing every discussion. The ambassador's aide, a younger member of his species, nodded in agreement as Kelvin continued. Our dietary requirements are very specific. We need certain enzymes that most species find disgusting. Every meal had become a source of embarrassment and tension. The Outer Rim delegates thought we were being deliberately difficult. Destiny watched quietly as the ambassador spoke, remembering that difficult week when 2 entire civilizations had nearly gone to war over what seemed like simple meal planning. Dr. Johnson didn't just solve our food problem, the ambassador continued. She researched both cultures, found foods that we could share, and created meals that honored both our traditions. But more than that, she explained to each side why the other's eating habits made perfect sense given their biology and history. The Emperor listened with growing interest as murmurs of agreement rippled through the restaurant. This wasn't the behavior he expected from what he had assumed was just a simple service worker. A new voice joined the conversation. Captain Mora of the Stellar Freight Guild stood up, her forearms gesturing expressively as she spoke. Your Majesty, I've been running cargo ships for 30 years. I've seen how most species treat each other when they think no one important is watching. She walked closer to the center of the restaurant, her multiple eyes focusing on different beings as she spoke. Last year, my crew was stranded here for 2 weeks waiting for engine repairs. We had no money for decent food, just basic rations that barely kept us alive. Dr. Johnson could have ignored us. We weren't diplomats or rich traders. Just working folks trying to make a living. The captain's crew members nodded from their table, clearly remembering the incident. Instead, she spent her own breaks researching our nutritional needs. She convinced the kitchen to let her experiment with ingredients, creating meals that cost the same as basic rations but gave us everything our bodies needed to stay healthy during the repairs. She paused, her voice becoming emotional. When I tried to tip her, she refused. She said that taking care of travelers was just what decent people do. That human kindness wasn't something you charge for. More beings began to stand up around the restaurant. A elderly Vorthan scholar with crystal formations growing from his shoulders spoke up next. The young doctor helped my granddaughter when she became ill during our journey. Human medicine is different from ours, but Dr. Johnson contacted experts across the galaxy until she found someone who understood our physiology. The testimonials kept coming. A group of young Andromedan students talked about how destiny had helped them understand Earth culture during their first visit to human space. A family of Centauri refugees described how she had made them feel welcome when they arrived with nothing but hope for a better life. With each story, the Emperor's expression changed. His guards, who had been standing at rigid attention, began to shift uncomfortably. They had served the Emperor for years, following his example of treating other species as inferior. Now they were hearing story after story about a human who had shown more wisdom and leadership than many of the officials in their own empire. The most surprising moment came when Zara, one of the Emperor's own guards, stepped forward. She was a young warrior from a species that the Dominion had conquered decades ago. Her people now served in the Emperor's military, but they had never forgotten their independence. Your Majesty, she said carefully, knowing that speaking out could mean punishment or worse, I must tell you something. When my unit was stationed here last year for diplomatic security, Dr. Johnson learned that we were far from home during our most important religious festival. The Emperor turned to look at his guard, surprised that she would speak without permission. But something in her manner made him listen instead of ordering her to be silent. She researched our traditions and worked with the kitchen to prepare foods that honored our ancestors. She did this quietly, without asking for recognition or reward. For the first time since joining your service, we felt like someone saw us as more than just soldiers. The restaurant had become completely still again, but now it felt different. The fear was gone, replaced by something the Emperor had rarely experienced in his presence, hope. The Emperor sat in complete silence as the weight of every testimony settled around him like a heavy blanket. For the first time in his long reign, he found himself truly listening to voices he had always ignored. His burning eyes had dimmed to barely glowing embers, and his massive frame seemed somehow smaller than it had just minutes before. Destiny approached his table one more time, but now her movements carried a different energy. She wasn't walking as a servant approaching a master. She was moving like one equal addressing another, with quiet confidence and genuine respect. Your Majesty, she said softly, placing a perfectly prepared plate in front of him. I took the liberty of preparing something special for you. The Emperor looked down at the meal and felt his breath catch. The dish was arranged with the precise geometric patterns that his species considered sacred. The colors progressed from deep purple to golden yellow in exactly the sequence that represented prosperity and wisdom in his culture. Even the temperature was perfect, creating small wisps of aromatic steam that carried scents he hadn't experienced since childhood on his home world. How did you know? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His own royal chefs had forgotten these traditions generations ago, focusing only on exotic ingredients and impressive presentations that meant nothing to his people's heritage. I studied your culture's food traditions while you were speaking with the other guests, Destiny explained simply. Your species has such a rich history of connecting food with spiritual meaning. The way your ancestors used meals to strengthen family bonds and community ties is beautiful. She sat down across from him without being invited, something that would have enraged him an hour ago. Now, somehow, it felt appropriate. The spices I used are from 7 different worlds, but when combined in the traditional ratios your people developed thousands of years ago, they create flavors that tell the story of your civilization's journey across the stars. The Emperor took a small bite and closed his eyes. The taste transported him back to his childhood, to memories of his grandmother preparing feast meals for the whole extended family. He had forgotten that food could be about more than fuel or status symbols. Why? He asked, opening his eyes to look at her. After everything I said to you, after I insulted your entire species, why would you show me such kindness? Destiny smiled, and for the first time since his arrival, it reached her eyes completely. Because that's what humans do, Your Majesty. We believe that everyone deserves a chance to be their best self, even when they're not showing it at the moment. She gestured around the restaurant, where beings from dozens of worlds were still watching their conversation with hopeful attention. Every person in this room has probably had a bad day, said something they regretted, or acted in a way that wasn't their finest moment. But we don't judge people by their worst moments. We look for their potential. The Emperor continued eating, each bite seeming to calm something deep inside him that had been angry for longer than he could remember. In my empire, strength means never showing weakness. Admitting mistakes is seen as failure. That sounds exhausting, Destiny said with genuine sympathy. Humans learned long ago that real strength comes from being able to change and grow. The strongest people we know are the ones who can say I was wrong and then do better. As the Emperor finished his meal, something remarkable happened. One by one, beings throughout the restaurant began approaching his table. Not to bow or show fear, but to introduce themselves as equals. They shared stories of their own worlds, offered trade opportunities, and extended invitations for cultural exchanges. Ambassador Kelvin was the first to extend his hand in the universal gesture of friendship. Your Majesty, the Rigel Commonwealth would be honored to host a delegation from your empire. We believe our peoples could learn much from each other. Captain Mora followed suit. The Freight Guild has always wanted to establish better routes through Dominion space. Perhaps we could discuss terms that benefit everyone involved. Even his own guard, Zara, approached with newfound confidence. Your Majesty, my people would be grateful for the chance to share our cultural festivals with the broader empire. We have much to offer beyond just military service. As the Emperor listened to offer after offer of genuine friendship and cooperation, he realized something profound. In all his years of ruling through fear and domination, he had never experienced anything like this. People were approaching him not because they had to, but because they wanted to. When the evening finally wound down, Emperor Kraft stood to leave. But instead of storming out as he had entered, he paused beside Destiny's station. His voice, when he spoke, was completely different from the roaring tyrant who had arrived hours earlier. Dr. Johnson, he said formally, I would be honored if you would consider a position as cultural advisor to my empire. We clearly have much to learn about true leadership. Destiny considered his offer seriously before responding. Thank you, Your Majesty. That's very generous. But I think I can do more good right here, helping beings from across the galaxy understand each other one meal at a time. The Emperor nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his ancient eyes. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps the greatest teachers are those who choose to serve rather than rule. As he walked toward the exit, followed by his guards who now carried themselves differently, the Emperor paused one last time. Dr. Johnson, I hope you know that tonight you accomplished something that armies and weapons never could. You changed an empire without firing a single shot. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm of conversation and commerce, but something fundamental had shifted. Beings who had never spoken before were sharing tables and stories. Trade deals were being discussed between former enemies. And in the center of it all, Destiny continued her work, taking orders and serving meals with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had found their true calling in making the galaxy a little bit kinder, one person at a time.